Welcome in. Check the mic. Instant reaction. It's instant reaction time, even though the scouting combine is still going on. The big boys, the second group of the O-line, they're running right now. But hey, Sam, let's discuss what we've seen so far since Thursday. Talking a little NFL scouting combine.
Sounds good. How's it going, Steve? You came away from the combine with illness. You tried to give it to me. I avoided it, luckily.
I did. I had to play through. We had last year I had strep, and that killed me. And this year picked up some sickness. I don't want to mention it because I had to play through it. Okay. Let me just say that. We had things that needed to be done. We had people to see, and we had to play through. Was it my flu game? Maybe, but we made it. And all I know is my wife was MVP of the week. She sent an IV to my room to get me going on Friday. So I was ready to go for everything I needed to do that day. So I had a homemade IV, vitamin C, little B12. We had it all on Friday, and it got me through the rest of the week.
Not sure homemade is the right description.
It was just, I don't know, delivered.
Right.
Delivered
but that's
to the
different
hotel.
to like homemade, which suggests somebody like rando in a kitchen whipped this up.
No, it was a specific cocktail to get me, recovering and ready to go. So I don't know where you want to start, but a lot happened. Obviously, you want to talk winners and losers so far. People where they're getting the positive buzz. Let's start with some winners here. Who do you have, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously got multiple days worth of this thing now, so there's a bunch of either category. Generally, as is obviously typical for me, I'm going to stay positive. More winners than losers. First one, James Pearce Jr. The dude can fly, right? Like he backed that up. That part of him, I think we answered fairly conclusively. Legitimate speed, like fastest 40, fastest 10-yard split. The get off is there. The straight line speed is there. He's going to have other questions to answer, but that part of things he firmly declared right out of the gate. Him, Shamar Stewart, the other kind of athletic freak show on the defensive line. Stewart had a 40-inch vertical, a sub 1.6 second get off. So the guys that we expected to be athletically freaky on the defensive line were athletically freaky.
Yeah, I mean, both of those guys for sure. Let's we should remind people to, Tennessee edge, James Pearce, Texas A&M edge, Shamar Stewart. We're still early in draft season for a lot of people here, making sure that we remind people where they're coming from and everything. Pearce, early in the week, we were asking around with a lot of people that, what's going on with Pearce? Why is he falling? Heard character concerns come up multiple times about Pearce. We had heard rumblings going in and more while we were there. So we'll see how that balances out, right? As far as the workouts go, he definitely ticked those boxes. And then Shamar Stewart's going to be, Sam, I think we're going to talk about him a lot between now and the draft because we've always been the people fighting for production over combine and, where to put combine in its proper place, right? I always describe it as, like a college class, right? A college class where you have 3 exams that are all 30% each. And then 10% of your grade is participation. Combine's closer to participation than it is the exam, in my opinion. It's closer to the 10% than it is, a third of your grade. But, it's significant for players on the edge. And Shamar Stewart's a guy that doesn't have great production, but had that outstanding combine and ticks the boxes that people expected. It wasn't 280, but high 260s, fast, explosive. The jumps were great. So it was a huge week for Shamar Stewart. And I don't know if that locks him up in the top 15 or what, but he's certainly, going pretty high, I think, because of the workout.
Well, that's the thing. I think it's an easier conversation around him than it has been for some of the other players that we've sort of had these conversations with in the past. Because number one, we're not talking about him going number 1 overall this year, right? It's not the same conversation as it was with Trayvon Walker. Number two, I think his production, it's more of a lack of sacks as opposed to a lack of outright production of any description, right? It's not quite the same thing where we've been talking about previous sort of stellar athletes that didn't have any kind of college production at all. Like Stewart's actually been pretty productive in certain areas, like pass rush win rate. He's had pressures. It just haven't converted to sacks. it's not like he's not been one of the most productive, college pass rushers or anything. But we're not talking about a guy with a total and complete absence of any form of production. We're talking about a special athlete with some production concerns who's being talked about in the middle of the first round and maybe even lower. I mean, he's number 19 on the consensus board right now. That's a much easier conversation to have than, hey, why is this guy who's never had any production going number 1 overall?
I mean, just looking at career PFF grades, they are almost identical to Trayvon Walker. Now, the one thing you would say for Shamar Stewart, though, is his first year was his worst year. So if you just took his last 2 and weighed those a little bit higher, it's better. But the career production PFF grade of 67, Trayvon Walker's 69, PFF grade of 63 run defense, Trayvon Walker's 67, pass rush grade of 70 to Trayvon Walker's 65. Like, they're pretty close. And the workouts are also very similar. So I don't think the comps are unfounded. The one difference is Shamar Stewart, a lot of that's being dragged down, I think, by his first season. And maybe he's shown a little bit more progression, but I still think it's generally in a similar bucket as Trayvon Walker. And so we'll see, man. I mean, there's other more productive pass rushers that he'll go ahead of, and we get more data points as far as how much you take that athletic freak, though. I will say Stewart, trending in the right direction, was excellent against the run last year for Texas A&M. So regardless, he won this week because he ticks the boxes expected to be ticked. Any other names you have on that you want to highlight, or do you want me to pick some?
I've got a lot. Why don't you kick in some?
I had Pearce. I'm going to say Landon Jackson, Arkansas. So I'm trying to go in order with like defensive linemen way back Thursday afternoon. It's like talking Thursday night football here. Landon Jackson had the explosive jumps from Arkansas. He plays like a power player, and he was explosive, right? So I think that was huge for him, for a guy who wins with power as often as he does at Arkansas. And I'm going to say Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College, because of the agility drills. He was the top agility drill guy on the edge, and I thought that was huge for him. Now, he weighed in the 240s, not great, but I thought that was big for him, even though we're not talking 40s and explosion for him. We're talking about the agility drills, which are as important, if not more important, when it comes to pass rushers. So I think as far as the D-line goes, a bunch of those guys really helped themselves.
Yeah. Do you want to stick then with the defensive line? Because I think for the loser side of the spectrum, I think you have to start throwing Deone Walker in there, the monster nose tackle from Kentucky. The book on him, effectively, or like the nutshell version of him, if you were hearing somebody talk about him before we got to this draft prospect, is this is somebody who flashes amazing plays on tape, but he's going to be a physical freak, and being able to move the way he does at that size. Well, the size stuff is checked out. I mean, he's big. He's 340 plus pounds. Like, he's an absolute monster. But the athleticism isn't there. So not only are people souring on his tape overall and going, well, okay, the flashes are nice, but the flashes barely take place and the negatives are awful. But he's actually not that freaky an athlete at all. He's just a big guy. So that damages his case quite a lot. If you're looking at this guy and going, well, the tape isn't great, and what we were planning on hanging our hat on was like freaky athleticism at that size. But now you take that away and we're just talking about size.
And all we saw were the 2 jumps, vertical of 25 and
awful
25 inches. That's 5th percentile. Broad jump, 8 feet, 8 inches. That's 14th percentile. He did come in at 6'7", 331 with 34 plus inch arms and 98th percentile hands. Like, he is that big, huge monster. Now, he's not 360 or 345 or whatever he was listed at, but 6'7", 331, pretty good size. But yeah, the vertical, like, those jumps were not good at all, and it almost matches like the same inconsistency maybe that you see on film, where he is not always playing with good pad level. He's not always using his power, which does exist. When he does, it looks great. When he doesn't, man, like the number of times I saw him 8 to 10 yards off the ball, not great. And I think you're talking about a guy that was once talked about being in the first round. Now maybe like back end of day 2 into day 3. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the rest of the league consensus is, but his pro day, assuming he does something at his pro day, he's got a couple weeks. I think it's the 11th. He's got like a week to train and do something, and show something on those days.
Particularly, I mean, either he was significantly smaller always than is sort of listed, whatever, which is a big thing. Like Mason Graham came in at 290 something. He was listed at 320. I don't think Mason Graham was ever anything like 320 pounds just based off looking at his tape. It's conceivable he slimmed down to try and run, but he didn't run at the combine. But to slim down generally, the same thing can be true for Deion Walker. Maybe he lost a bunch of weight to try and work on drills or measurable stuff. But if that's the case, that's even worse for the jumps that we did see from him, right? Is if he lost a bunch of weight in order to jump and run better, well, he did part of it without the other. There's no benefit yet. So, I think his stock is tumbling postseason so far.
Grant, I was going to say you must have Mason Graham as a loser. I was going to bring him up just because of the way. I think the arm length thing was pretty obvious. Everybody saw that on film, right? And it's one of those, I don't care a ton, but the weight thing matters a little bit if he's in the 290s and you expect him to be at least 305 to 310.
I don't have him as a big loser because I don't think it was shocking to anybody. I don't think anyone expected him to be anywhere near 320. Like, sure, north of 300, but like 295 versus 305 for a guy that you expected to be short-armed and relatively small anyway. Like, is that a massive surprise to anybody? Like, his profile right now looks very similar to Kyle Williams. I was talking about this with Ben Stockwell yesterday. Like,
oh, nice.
Ben was like, he reminds me of somebody from like back in the PFF grading days. I can't think who it is. I'm like, it sounds like Kyle Williams.
Good one. That is a really good one. He was one of the earliest PFF favorites. Very disruptive defensive tackle for the Bills.
Only I would expect him to still measure significantly more athletic than Kyle Williams. So if that's what we're talking about, right? You've got Kyle Williams' body type, but a more athletic version, and certainly at college more productive. Are you cool with that? And not just cool with that, are you cool with drafting that at the very top of the draft? I'm still fine with it. So I don't really have Mason Graham as a huge negative, even though I understand why, people would be a little bit perturbed by what he measured.
All right, we could bounce around here as far as winners and losers. The one linebacker I did want to highlight, though, was Jihad Campbell. I thought, ticked a lot of athletic boxes for Alabama. The one thing I will say, I know people have projected him as maybe as a pass rusher and one of those guys that could do the whole hybrid deal. I don't think that's his game, to be honest. I think he's just a good all-around athletic linebacker. Let him be. Not everybody's going to be a Micah Parsons conversion. Can he blitz a little bit? Yes, but I think he's more of an explosive blitzer than a guy that's going to go win one-on-ones. But I thought he did a good job of probably locking up LB1 in this class.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. So some of these for me, they're based off the data, the numbers, the measurables. Some of them, though, got to dive a little bit deeper. Sticking with the defensive line, Boise State defensive lineman Ahmad Hassanein. Now, the workout numbers were not spectacular, but number one, this guy has an amazing backstory, which I think people will gravitate to. Like, the guy was not even like a college guy, was like a child CrossFitter. It's like one of the best age level CrossFitters in Egypt, right? And then his family kind of brought him over, and like, it's like, this guy's going to be amazing. We'll get him into football. This will be the thing. Tried him at like a couple of different positions in football and didn't necessarily have the abilities right out of the gate for certain positions. I think they tried him at linebacker at one point. And then what do you do when you have like a fairly impressive athlete who doesn't really know the game necessarily? You just say, son, go get the passer. Forget everything else. Just go get the quarterback. So they put him on the defensive line. This guy, for every drill, was like pumped up to the nines, right? Like yelling at the guy doing the drill. So there's like a jawing contest between Hassanein and like the dude starting the drill, like the coach running it. They're like, let's go. It was like, you remember Danny Bateman from The Replacements? Like, the whole thing was just like that. So again, I'm not sure everybody will love that, but there's definitely one or two coaches up in the stands that are like, I want that guy. Just from that, I want Danny Bateman to go get me the football, and that's Hassanein.
I've not to relate this to me, but I've told the story before how I used to have to like yell at myself sometimes to get pumped up before pitching, right? It's self-talk or whatever. But I used to yell into my glove. You throw the last pitch before the inning, Sam, as you know, they throw it down to second base. And as they're doing that, I walk around the mound, and then you go get the ball from the third baseman and you start the inning. So while that's happening, I would yell into my glove to get myself in the right mindset. But my second baseman used to always think I was yelling at him. Like, I got asked multiple times, like, you yelling at me? I'm like, no, it's me. So it's not you, it's me. So I was just my own getting pumped up routine.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've told this story on the podcast before as well. I used to play with a guy who, again, didn't really know the game at all. But so what do? You say you put him on the defensive line. You say, go get the quarterback. He was like a really good three tech, essentially. And about halfway through his second season, at one point in the huddle, in the middle of the game, asked a guy what a down was. Like, that's the level we were playing at, right?
That's
but
great.
I mean, so Hassanine is let's say he's at a higher level than that, but it's the same concept, right? Like, he doesn't really know what he's doing overall, but like, just go get the quarterback, go cause havoc in the backfield, go nuts. That's what you're dealing with right now.
Let's assume he's got the basic rules down.
Yeah. Probably
probably
slightly further on than Stevie, but we're in the same world.
So you have that in the winner category.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other? Where else you want to go? What else you want to highlight before we get into some?
Well, that's me done. I think for the D line anyway. D line and linebackers, I'm out.
Okay. What was day 2?
DBs?
We had DBs and tight ends.
Right,
DBs.
I got some winners for DBs.
7 cornerbacks ran sub 4.4 and 2 safeties. And one safety, of course, Nick Emmanwori, we'll be talking about a bit here. But where do you want to go as far as winners on the DB day?
Well, let's start with him then. I mean, he's got to be the biggest winner maybe of the entire weekend. I mean, South Carolina safety has put together one of the all-time combines, right? One of these like Vernon Davis type of, you just detonated the entire combine. This is a 6'3", 220-pound safety who leapt 43 inches in the vertical and ran one of the fastest 40 times of anybody out there. I mean, it's just nuts. Like, you just went out there and completely crushed the combine. Like, he's got to be one of the biggest winners of the entire week.
6'3", 220, you mentioned. 32.5-inch arms at safety. That's fine. 4.38, 1.49, 10-yard split, 98th percentile for safeties.
Is that still tied for the best 10-yard split of anybody?
I haven't seen the update yet.
It was as of late yesterday, and I'm guessing an offensive lineman hasn't beaten it.
Now, the one thing I don't completely understand is the difference in percentiles here, but that's fine. 43-inch vertical for Emmanwori, close to 100th percentile.
Right.
And 11'6" broad jump.
43. That's like the third best vertical that's ever been measured. Like, that's either one or two spaces behind, the ridiculousness that was when, like.
Now, I quote tweeted somebody, I forget. I apologize if you're listening, and I'm not giving you proper credit. But this was Obi Melifonwu erasure, right? The way everybody was mentioning. We've never seen anything like this, because Obi, back in the 2017 NFL draft, NFL scouting combine, 6'4", 224. Now, he only ran a 4.4. He was slow. But he had a 44-inch vertical, 11'9" broad, and some above-average agility drills. Melifonwu literally did have maybe, the best combine of all time, one of them at least.
So this is, I think it's either second or third to Melifonwu's like vertical in terms of all-time number. Like, it's right up there of all-time freakiness.
Where was Byron Jones? Wasn't he right up there?
Byron Jones was the world record broad jump.
Broad, that's what it was. He was like over 12 or something. Wasn't he ridiculous?
Yeah.
Where is this?
He literally, there was like, that was genuinely a world record.
See, the numbers here have him as a 45-inch vert. What?
Byron Jones?
That's what I'm seeing.
Maybe he did it at his pro day.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the best.
Yeah.
Combo. Some of these percentiles might be off here. But Emmanwori, so listen, I don't want to get into like, like when they put comps up on TV. I get why they do it. We just, in your brain, it just assumes like this means that he'll be the same level of this player, but you're just trying to say he's the best athlete. But Emmanwori is a good football player too, right? He's a guy that can play deep, can break on the ball, can, run the alley, can tackle, can hit hard, play the run. So he's a good football player who also tested well. Melifonwu was not a great football player, but you're like, wow, look at this size and testing. If we can teach him how to play football, there's something here. He never really got it. So, we go back to the Shamar Stewart thing and the Trayvon Walker discussion. The on-field ability still trumps everything. But when you add the athleticism to it, it does bring an extra, like, what more can you do? What more should we be able to see? What upside are we bringing to the table? Emmanwori ticked so many boxes here, broke the combine, did a great job, and he's a good football player. So you're talking about a guy already talked about as a late first, and now you're thinking, okay, is this that safety that sneaks into the top 10 to 15 as we've seen in the past? I doubt it in today's NFL because of the need for offensive and defensive linemen around the league. But I think he's going to go, maybe mid first, and has certainly more of an opportunity to do that now after the testing.
And I don't know how many teams would be interested in this, but that size puts you firmly in the range of off the ball linebacker in today's NFL. Like back in the day, that was like just a general random big safety. But right now, like 6'3", 225 is prototypical linebacker size these days. So, if a team likes the way he plays in the box as well, potentially he's a linebacker for them as in addition to or alternative to a safety.
Or that early down safety, dime linebacker, that hybrid player. I mean, there's a lot that he can do. And like I said, good football player. So great week for Emmanwori. Who else on Maxwell Hairston, I think needs to be mentioned, from Kentucky. Good size, ran the 4.3. And like I said, there were seven corners who ran sub 4.4. I wasn't sure if they said there was new turf in Indianapolis. I don't know if that meant like this is good or bad as far as it'll be a slow track or a fast track. I think at the end of the day, it's like it felt a little bit faster, but Hairston goes 4.28, 40-inch vertical, 96th percentile broad jump from Kentucky, and 5'11", 183. Now, he's another one of those guys. You hate this, Sam. He was listed at 6'1", and now he's 5'11". In real life. So it changes perception a little bit when you talk about a corner, losing 2 inches off the list.
I would hate it, except that he now becomes the closest comp to me in terms of size in this draft. He's almost identical to my dimensions.
Speed. Yeah.
More or less the same. But
I was going to ask, you want to go to Kentucky Pro Day? We'll test that out. Kentucky Pro Day, March 11th. We can drive down for that.
Get a picture of me standing right next to him. Yeah. We are both 5'11", 180-ish.
With a second difference in our 40s.
Yeah. So yeah, Harrison, I think, was a winner. Also, Jahdae Barron from Texas. The thing with the corner group is, right, there was an opportunity there because so many of the top guys are not working out. Travis Hunter didn't do the workouts. Will Johnson from Michigan didn't do the workouts. So guys like Jahdae Barron, Harrison, as you mentioned, the other guy I felt that had an amazing day was Darian Porter, the Iowa State corner, who's such a weird story because we're like 6 seasons deep into his college career. And yet last season was like 7 starts at corner. So he's 24 years old, but he had a 9.99 RAS, relative athletic score thing, right? 6 shuttle, 3 cone. Shuttle was like 4.04. The 3 cone was 6.7, in addition to running crazy 40 time. Like that guy had an amazing combine. And you're like, so we just talked about these guys that are coming in recently, right? The Reek Woolens of the world that were special combine athletes, not necessarily great college football players at corner. That's Darian Porter's profile right now. This is someone that doesn't have the wealth of tape that you're like, he's going to be a star at corner, but man, that's an athletic profile to bet on.
I'll give you one other name to combine there and then throw it all together. Zoff Frazier from UTSA, just like Reek Woolen, right? Same school. So now another 6'3" corner. Now Frazier ran 4.36. Porter beat Frazier in all these numbers. 4.36, a 7-second 3 cone, a 4.26 shuttle. Porter was like a track star at Iowa State. You mentioned the inexperience, the age and everything, but it's fascinating. He is so athletic, and you could see it on film from Porter. Then Frazier. Now they're both doing this at 6'3". So the Reek Woolen comp, the Zion McCollum comp, those are the 2 most recent crazy tall and long players who were fast and quick, all of those things at the same time. And then the other 2 that come to mind were Kevin King a few years ago from Washington, who had that ridiculous 3 cone, I believe it was, and Akello Witherspoon. We're talking all guys who are like 6'2", 6'3". And usually when you're that big, you think about guys who struggle with change of direction, but these guys all did pretty well with agility drills. And I mentioned all those names just so that we don't get too bogged down with like, hey, Reek Woolen's turned out pretty good. Zion McCollum's turned out pretty good. Kevin King had some flashes, but it was not very good by the end of his career. Akello Witherspoon's been very up and down across various teams throughout his career. So size and movement skills don't always equal, great upside. We could see a variety of different careers, but it's a good group of corners that were pretty big, fast, explosive, but also with good change of direction through the years here.
And then just to wrap it up for Jedi Barron, the Texas do-it-all DB. I mean, he's drawn a lot of comparisons to Brian Branch, who was that kind of, remember, my analysis of Branch at the time was I think he can play anywhere in your secondary. The thing that really caused him to slip at draft time was you ran like a 4.55 or something, right? And people look at that and say, you just can't play corner at that kind of speed. Barron goes out there and runs a 4.4 flat. Now, okay, he's got really stumpy arms, right? I think were they 29 inches, something like that, like really short arms. But 4.4 flat on a 1.56 10-yard split. I mean, those are numbers that can absolutely not just hang, but those are corners that are 100% legitimate at outside boundary corner. So Barron is someone I think that can, again, play anywhere in your secondary. Now, maybe he'll be limited with the short arms thing. You don't want to maybe playing press man on the outside. But this is someone that can play outside corner, nickel corner, safety. I think that guy solidified himself as like a legitimate high-end first-round draft pick.
Barron's name came up so often in just people we were talking to as far as, hey, love this guy. People we talked to, I think I saw Todd McShay talking him up. I do believe DJ was talking him up on the NFL Network broadcast to the point where I think some people are like, man, I would take this guy top 15. Now, remember, we used to mock Brian Branch in the top 10 often. And is he a top 10 player in that draft? Absolutely. He went in the 40s or whatever it was, 50s. I forget the exact number. Barron has a chance to be that guy who's a top 10 player in this draft. And the only thing that drops him is he's probably a nickel. Can he play outside? Sure. But he might be a nickel. But that's the old, this dude's just a good football player, right? Mike Sanders still, Brian Branch, just a good football player. The only thing holding him down is maybe being pigeonholed as a nickel. I think Barron can do it all, though. And you're right, the arm length thing, it is under 30-inch arms, so that, you know, limits your press ability and maybe some of the scheme flexibility. But if you're not asking a corner to press a whole lot, dude, Barron can play just fine. So I thought him running the 4.39 was outstanding.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was gonna have on my losers list, I was gonna put Gunnar Helm, the tight end from Texas. Only it emerged today that he had a false start. He went early or bad false start. You know, got blown up on the 40 before he'd done anything. Like his very first attempt. And as he's slowing down, there's video of this out there. He like comes down on one ankle and it just rolls. Like he rolls his ankle pretty badly. So he obviously gets the PR out there after the fact and sends Rap Sheet a picture of his busted ankle and the swelling the day after the fact. But you can see it in the video. And like this was a guy who ran a 4.9, then got it down to a 4.8. A 30-inch vertical was the worst among tight ends. His drills looked rough as well. Like this is somebody who's supposed to be a yards after the catch athleticism dude, and that looked terrible. I'm willing to throw all of that out because of that ankle roll. I think, look, he's going to get grit points from the NFL for gutting through the injury. And now he gets to get healthy and go do it all again at a pro day where hopefully
he'll have to. Yes, he'll have to do that. Get healthy, get to the pro day. That is one. So that's one of those, at least the agent report via the insiders, at least that.
The picture was straight from Gunnar. It was like from the phone of Gunnar, here's my ankle.
Yeah, that was good. So it wasn't through his agent via certain insiders who are like, oh, Gunnar really had a bad ankle. You know, you got to throw this one out. We had evidence in this one.
And the video is key. Like, cause you know, who knows, right? With the ankle thing coming from Gunnar's phone, but like you can see the video of it. The dude rolled his ankle pretty badly. And anyone that's done that, I don't know how you can do a proper workout after that. That's not good.
You'll like this, Sam. The NFL Network currently live talking about Gray Zabel making athleticism comps to the great Evan Mathis. That is the comp for Gray Zabel at 6'5", almost 6'6", 312 pounds. Probably going to go play a little guard, maybe center at the NFL level. Evan Mathis, zone blocking, never loses in the run game genius, an early PFF favorite during our early PFF grading days.
And Mathis was a sneaky athletic freak as well. I mean, Gray Zabel is on my list of winners for today. I mean, he's got the third highest offensive line vertical jump ever. He's got a Tristan Wirfs-esque vertical. Remember when Wirfs blew up the combine and everyone was like, well, that's how you you get thighs and an ass like that. That's how you're able to jump out of the gym. Well, Gray Zabel's doing that right now, like same kind of numbers.
All right, going back to the DBs and tight ends here. Harold Fannin probably needs to be mentioned on the losers list just because of the 4.7 140 and because he's weighing in at 241 as a move tight end, and he feels like a 4.5 guy, I think, when you watch him on film. And so we'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about Matthew Golden and what you do with these numbers, right? When it just looks different on film, because Golden ran 4.3 under 4.3. It didn't feel like it. Fannin ran 4.71 and it didn't feel like it, right? It felt faster. And what do? Do you trust your eyes? Do you is it a training thing or a lack of training thing? Is it just you're good at track starts? All of those things can be true. And then we also have, hey, if I like the guy on film and he runs well, of course he's athletic because I saw it first. And if a guy underwhelms and you like him, it's like, it's just underwear Olympics here, Sam. I don't know. But I don't know what to do with Harold Fannin, who's supposed to be this high volume pass catching tight end, running a 4.7. You want to see a little bit better than that at his size, I think.
It's getting really interesting now, though, because you're getting this NGS tracking data that's being put out alongside just the basic old school measurement numbers, right? So now what do they got? Combine IQ is what it's called. If you just type that into Google, you can find some of this stuff. It's like spitting you out a whole bunch of these numbers, which are number one, miles per hour, just at various points. So you can see who hit the top miles per hour during the 40, but also who hit a miles per hour like at the 10. And then they've also got quantifying like the actual acceleration. What was your max acceleration number? So 40-yard time it's a very static number, right? Like just how fast did you cover 40 yards, right? But we've talked about this before. There's almost like 3 different stages of speed. What is your first get off like? And that's the 10-yard split. What's the middle phase, that build up acceleration? And then what's your top speed? So Bond, I think, is one of the losers of the combine because he was like asked what was he going to do in the 40. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to break the record. I'm going to break the record and I might run a 4.1. I've got that in me. And this is somebody that would be kind of silly if anybody did that and then ran a 4.4 the next day. It's extra silly when you literally came from the same school and were teammates with the guy who'd set the record a year ago. You must have known he would smoke you in a 40-yard dash race. It wasn't a surprise that actually it turns out I'm like 0.2 of a second slower than this guy. So Bond talking all that and then going out there and running a 4.4 effectively, I think is pretty stupid. But what was interesting is he did end up setting the highest miles per hour figure in the 40. So his top speed was the highest of anybody that ran.
So what do you do with that? Bond ended up at 4.39, which was 3, 6, 7, 8, 9th among wide receivers, tied for 9th among wide receivers, right? So 10, he was one of 10 who ran sub 4.4 among receivers. We can move on to receivers right now. The only thing where he was a loser is the fact that he just, had unfailing confidence, right? He was and everything else we heard off the field, off field showed up a lot in conversations about Isaiah Bond this week. First off, just to report that, and then second, he said I'm going to break the record and was off by 0.2 basically.
So there's a few things in there, right? Number one, 4.4 flat is a perfectly good time for a wide receiver generally. Now it's not above good, it's just good. That's like that. When DJ runs through and he's like, hey, the top X receivers in the NFL last season, their average was like a 4.4 flat. So it's right where you need to be a good wide receiver in the NFL. But his college tape is not that of a good NFL wide receiver right now. So if you want to if you want to sell Bond to somebody, you're saying this guy's a speedster. He can run 4.2, and that's what's going to separate him at this point. Well, if it turns out he can't do that, then we're back to what does the tape say? And the tape doesn't love him yet. The second thing is, if you're going to go out there and say, yeah, I can run a 4.1 and then run a 4.4 flat, I mean, confidence is great, but that's delusional. And when you're coupling that with a guy who does seem to have off-field / attitude concerns, those are not necessarily it starts to form a pattern at that point. And maybe that's unfair, but that's the problem with stuff like that. If you're going to go throwing around things like that, you need to at least vaguely back it up. Otherwise you look insane. And it doesn't help. So yeah, I think generally Bond was a loser from that whole thing.
Let's talk about Isaiah Bond's teammate this year, Matthew Golden. Go ahead.
Right. That's why, by the way, that's the other thing. They say, oh, and by the way, the guy Matthew Golden that nobody was expecting to be faster than you outran you by a clear 10th of a second and ran a 4.29.
And for the record, Bond was not teammates with Xavier Worthy. He did come in from Alabama, so they were not teammates. I know it's tough to, thousands of transactions every year. So Matthew Golden
just by not being able to run a 4.2.
Matthew Golden runs 4.29. I just retweeted something out. I thought I was crazy, right? So in my notes, I hate when this happens, Sam. Sometimes maybe I'm dumb, but sometimes it happens. And I've seen other people do it too, right? You're watching pre-combine and you're writing notes about a player. And one of my notes with Golden is it doesn't feel fast or dynamic. That's what I felt. That's what I felt. I didn't feel dynamism watching Matthew Golden on film. I think he's a good route runner. There's some times where he gets out of his breaks and I'm like, whew, slick. Love it. Really smooth. Felt more like a Romeo Dobbs type to me, where he's not special at anything, but I'm like, yeah, you see some good routes in there. He catches the ball fine. I don't want to build an offense around him necessarily, but man, nice complimentary piece. Fringe first, if anything, maybe closer to like a second round pick, say. And then he goes and runs 4.29. And I'm sitting here scratching my head saying, okay, maybe my eyes are terrible. I'm getting old and I'm missing it, or I'm just not gauging things properly. And I mentioned this to our friend Mike Renner, and he's like, I felt the same thing. And so, okay, now we get two people. We got more evidence mounting here. It's not just me. And then I just retweeted someone else who said, is this the slowest 4.2 guy ever? And it's him trying to outrun like 4 players from Arizona State, and he doesn't. So this is an interesting dynamic here. I wonder if the chat thinks I'm crazy too. If you've watched Matthew Golden, do you agree? Did he look like a 4.29 guy? Because when you watch Xavier Worthy play at 4.21, like he felt fast on the field. He looked fast. Right. The kid that the Browns drafted a couple years ago that went in the third, Anthony Schwartz, felt fast. John Ross felt fast, right? There are guys who feel fast who run sub 4.3. And then there's Golden. And I don't know if I'm crazy about this, but he didn't feel fast, and then he ran 4.29. So ultimately, he's a winner. He's got a 4.29 next to his name. But I don't think I ever saw that really from Golden on the field.
No, and you're right. And I think that's a discussion for kind of later on in this process. But I think the fact that he was a guy already starting to pop up at the bottom of first round mock drafts, who's now put a 4.29 next to his name, huge winner of the weekend for him, I think. And he outran Bond, who was talking about breaking the record and stuff. So I think he has to go down as a winner, whether or not that will actually, create a better football player in the NFL. But then the flip side of that conversation is Oregon tiny slot receiver Tez Johnson, who had just a weird profile that he put together. So number one, he shows up at 5'9", 154 pounds. 154 pounds, basically as light as you're ever going to find an NFL player at any position. He then runs a 4.55 in his first run. Now he got that down to a 4.51, I think, but 4.5 flat, let's say, at 154 pounds is bad. The 10-yard split wasn't lightning either. Like, he looked like he got out quickly, but the 10-yard split was average to above average for that kind of size. His shuttle was solid, pretty good, but not like, blow the doors away for that side. But then he runs a 6.65 3-cone, which is really good, like legit speed, and hit the highest top speed of any wide receiver during the drills. So not the top speed of the 40, but during, the route running drills, the gauntlet, all that kind of stuff, right? He was the guy on a go route that clocked the highest top speed during that stuff. So you've got this weird profile of a guy who ran bizarrely slow. Everyone's going, this guy's lightning, but runs a 4.5 without a lightning fast 10-yard split, blazing fast 3-cone, not blazing fast anything else. And then actually, when you put the tracker on him, he was also the fastest guy during the drills. No idea what you do with that. None.
So when you're watching Tez, didn't you always feel like he was quicker than fast anyway? Or did you think he was just both?
I thought he had deep speed as well, which apparently he does if you measure it by tracking data. But I think the reason I would put him down as a loser from the combine from this, number one, that's just such a confused profile that I think a bunch of teams are going to be, I don't know what that is. Number two, I think it does limit him now to gimmick slot role, which is, remember the question when he's getting Tank Dell comps, right? The difference between him and Tank Dell, who also had a slightly screwy workout profile in terms of speed and stuff, was we know Tank Dell can play deep, right? We know he has a full route tree and can do a bunch of different things. We don't really know that about Tez yet. And I don't think he's going to get that opportunity based off this profile.
Tank ran 4.49. I mean, we're really talking 200.
But he did have a much faster 10-yard split. Now it's a much smaller number difference-wise.
1.5. Yeah.
Right. Fast. And that was also the year, remember, where the numbers weren't quite adding up in terms of like the 10s and the 40s weren't matching like across the board. And everyone was like, I don't know if those 40s are like legit.
It's a different position, but I will remind people about Bucky Irving's underwhelming combine last year. And again, this is agenda driven because I like Tez Johnson. I think it might be too much to project him as Tank Dell, because I think you make a great point. We've seen more of the versatility from Tank in college and at the Senior Bowl, and then it projected to the NFL. Tez might be a slot only, but I do think his quickness will play, just like Bucky Irving ran 4.55 at 195 pounds last year. 5'9", 195, supposed to be a scat back, and he runs 4.55. Not overwhelming as far as the 10-yard split or the jumps, right? None of the jumps were that good. 32-inch vertical,
right? That's
nothing. And then Bucky Irving gets out there and he looks like the most dynamic player on the field for the Bucs in the second half of the season. So, there's always a little bit of the, proceed with caution when you see some of this. And they were teammates at Oregon, Tez and Bucky.
I tweeted this out, but it's one of my favorite stats of the weekend. Tez Johnson and Miami's Xavier Restrepo were exactly the same height, 5'9" and 7/8, right? So basically 5'10". Restrepo was 55 pounds heavier than Tez Johnson. That's a ludicrous for the same position, and not just like same in the way that DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are the same position. Like they will have the same role in the NFL in terms of you're both going to be slot guys, right? And one outweighs the other by 55 pounds at the same height. I can't think of like a disparity like that at that kind of size before.
It's one of my favorite things about you is always finding out those the size discrepancies or anomalies, we'll say.
And Restrepo, by the way, like 209 at 5'10 effectively is running back size. Like he's legitimately built like Barry Sanders.
Did he run? Did I miss that last night? I was driving home.
He didn't run.
Okay, because he feels like he's 4'7" on film, which is fine.
Right.
Because I think he just knows how to get open. He's going to be another interesting one. So him and Tez are like the productive, they're slots only. Are they going to go in the 4th round now? Tez? Is he going to go in the 3rd round? I mean, but like they could be really good football players. So I think they're a winner for some team, I think, where they're going to fall, but they're going to get good football. A team's going to get good football players.
Yeah. Loser of the combine still doesn't mean he won't be a good player.
I know what we're doing here, but like I want to add the analysis to it.
I'm reminding the people that are listening that are like,
Iowa State receivers were winners, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll. Now, Knoll, I think, felt fast and quick, right, on film. Higgins, 6'4". Now, you're going to love this, Sam. He's listed at 6'4", 215. And he comes to the combine and he is 6'4", 214. That is like Iowa State wins the combine because they're not lying on rosters. Mm-hmm. And then Higgins comes out and tears it up with a 4.47, which is great for his size, good vertical, 94th percentile vertical, 95th percentile broad jump. And then Jalen Knoll runs sub 4.4. And, that 1-2 punch was outstanding for Iowa State, and they worked out really well.
At 6'4", 214, Jaden Higgins outran Tez Johnson in both the 40 and the 10-yard split. That's stupid fast. Like, that's crazy for that size. I would throw one more guy in there as well. I had those guys as well. You're right. Both winners of the combine. And then Dante Thornton Jr., the Tennessee wide receiver, almost 6'5", ran a 4.3 flat. Tallest guy to hit that mark in over 20 years. A 1.51 10-yard split, which is faster than Tez and lightning fast. That's like 2/100ths of a second slower than Tank Dell at, twice the size. Fastest wide receiver in terms of miles per hour measured at the 10-yard mark. So like one of the fastest accelerating guys in the entire draft. And the second fastest overall mile per hour for any wide receiver behind only Bond over the 40. Like basically the fastest ever 6'3" or taller guy at the combine. All these numbers kind of go back to 03. There was some sort of watershed moment. I was trying to work out what it is, whether that was a shift in turf, whether that was RCA to the Lucas Oil. I'm not sure what happened in 03, but that's like the data set that all these combine numbers are giving you.
I will say that is one that I saw. I saw that one on film. That was like one play scouting with Dante Thornton. I was watching Oklahoma safety Billy Bowman, I believe. Where were you when you first saw Dante Thornton's speed? And he caught the ball and just outran the rest of the Oklahoma defense. And I'm like, all right, who's this guy? Caught my eye. And oh, shoot, he's 6'5". And now he comes in, he's 6'4.5", as you mentioned. He's tall. And he ran fast. And like when that 4.3 hit, and he didn't have a ton of volume, it didn't have a ton of college production. So I never put this out publicly. So, this isn't like retrospective, but I was like thinking like this guy's going to have the most buzz coming out of the combine because I think he's going to run fast. He did. And he has the size and he's got this uneven production profile or, just low volume production profile. So he's going to be interesting to see if he, how much Dante Thornton really jumps up.
With some pretty healthy like target share numbers at times. So I think his profile is definitely going to be on the rise coming out of this. All right, I got two more, I think, from both winners and losers.
Do it.
So Quinn Ewers, winner, right? Two reasons. Number one, I thought he looked pretty good throwing the ball. Like he was accurate. The arm looked pretty solid. But number two, we got the oblique injury propaganda out there front and center. Like this was a masterful job by Texas PR. We got all over during the week. Everyone's talking about this oblique injury that Quinn Ewers had that, by the way, that shut Derek Carr down for half the season. Quinn was out there gutting through it all the way through the year. And they even had Sark in the booth. Steve Sarkisian, his head coach, is like in the booth with DJ and Rich Eisen telling everyone about this oblique injury. So it's like, by the way, the fact that he played like crap last year, entirely explainable by this oblique injury. Look at him right now. He's out there dealing, looking great. So
I will say before the oblique injury, I might be drinking the Kool-Aid here, Sam. I'll tell you why. That Michigan game, right? It was the biggest. It was one of the biggest games of the year to that point. Now we didn't know how bad Michigan was going to be offensively going into that year, but they were still very good defensively, and that was probably Ewers' best game of his career. And all sorts of GMs there, and nobody knew who QB1 was going to be this year. And Cam Ward wasn't really a thing yet. You kind of sensed that he could be, but he wasn't there yet. And I really believed that GMs in person that saw Ewers that day, because in person matters the most, we're going to come out of that game saying he's QB1. After Michigan, week 2, it's a big game in Michigan. He's moving around the pocket, making some big plays, had a couple of big plays that were negated by penalty. And then it all fell apart, and it coincided with the injury, and his inconsistency in the injury did coincide. So you can almost kind of tell that story, and you could tell the story of he got better every year. And that was what I was rolling with, much like a Bo Nix, better every year. And Ewers was about to put together that season where you're like, okay, he was okay as a sophomore or whatever he was 2 years ago in 22. He was better in 23, and he's at his best in 24. And we didn't get that full storyline because of the injury. I think if all the propaganda is true, and I've heard this before from Sark, he said, if you just knew what he was battling through, and I heard this before the year, this wasn't just at the combine or during the season. If you knew what he was battling, you wouldn't criticize him as much. So Sark's been, he's had his back for quite a while now.
I'm not saying it's true or it's not either way, right? We now live in a post-truth society. Truth doesn't exist anymore. It's just whose story is more plausible. Texas's PR, Texas and Quinn Ewers people are coming out of this weekend going, we sold the best story we could possibly sell. We absolutely nailed this. He looked good in the workouts. We got the propaganda story out there. We fed everybody this idea that last season's 100% down to the oblique injury. We nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. Like stock on the rise. He's back to where he should have been. Like now, whether or not that's true or not, entirely different thing. But you couldn't have done a better job of selling Quinn Ewers than they did during this combine week. So Ewers, winner of the combine for me. And then sticking with quarterback, loser, Will Howard from Ohio State. I just did not look good. I mean, that guy, it's like how much do you ever weigh the throwing portion of a workout? They're throwing to different guys, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you're throwing to different guys. There are throws, however, where it doesn't matter who the receiver is. When you're leaving it 3.5 yards inside him on an outbreaking route, 10 yards downfield, unless the guy is Josh Kelly, there's no receiver that would have been in the right place for that throw. You know what I mean?
Only
the
worst throws. Only the worst throws matter in throwing. Only the ones that stand out. And Howard did miss some by a mile.
Right.
Yesterday. And I was there in person for that throwing session. So that is etched in my brain forever, man. It's I can't lose it. I will say Isaiah Bond was going full AD Mitchell too, cutting routes short and running them the wrong way. Etched in my brain because I was there. I was in the scout section too. Nice. NFL security, if you're listening, earmuffs. I was in with the scouts.
Well, that's like
made it into special area.
You now need to like triple count that. Like you were there and you were in the scout section. That's like 3 times more potent than any other.
I wasn't little inside info. So the 40-yard line at Indy is absolutely reserved for every NFL team. And I guess there's like a lottery system for which row you're going to get. And there's 32 teams. So like you might be row 32, you could be row 1. And so there's like a label on every row. So you have to sit in your row with your team at the 40. Now I was at the 45, so I wasn't exactly on the 40. I was right there though. I was right there. It's about halfway up. It was a good spot. I caught it. Good glimpse of everything there with the.
We can't trust
the
your
scouts
time
who weren't.
You're like offset.
No, you can't trust my time.
Right.
It was great. Everybody's got their stopwatch and they all go, vroom, vroom, click, and then they all show each other, and you have to use the trigger finger.
Can't use your pointing thumb. Finger. That's a ridiculous way.
No, I saw. So I don't want to I won't name names because I don't know his name. But there was somebody in the media section the other day with a stopwatch in the media section using his thumb on the stopwatch. And you immediately look like an amateur.
Right.
And so
that's why you're in the media section.
That's why you're in the media section. You have to use your pointing finger. And that's how you get the true reading.
All right. I got finally with the offensive linemen going today. I have a couple of offensive linemen on the winners and the loser side. But first, we want to ask people to please hit the subscribe button for more of this type of content, not to mention all the rest of the content that we're going to be having from here up until the draft and beyond. Hopefully, draft time will have our new studio. Until then, we will be remote. But if you haven't already, hit the like, hit the subscribe button. It all helps us survive in this world of everybody getting cut in the media landscape.
We can't just rely on Lions fans. We need all the other 31 fan bases this offseason.
Yeah, everybody. It takes a village, as they say.
If you're not subscribed, say so in the chat, and then click subscribe. There we go. Double like algorithm. Yeah. I'm not subscribed. Tell us, and then be like, okay, I hit it. I hit the subscribe button for you guys.
All right. We mentioned him before. North Dakota State, Gray Zabel. DJ was saying he can play all 5 positions on the offensive line. I don't know if anybody's having a better offseason so far than Gray Zabel. Went to the Senior Bowl, absolutely crushed it there all the way through the practices. Did it at all 3 interior positions, looked amazing, and then had some of the best measurables of testing of any lineman as well. So Gray Zabel, I think, has been phenomenal. I thought Josh Connerly, the Oregon offensive tackle, remember up until now for the offseason, the biggest sort of thing in his book has been getting wrecked by Mike Green in that 1 rep in the Senior Bowl. But he also got voted by the opposing players like one of the best players of the week during the Senior Bowl practices. So, and he looked really good in the drills today, looked fast, athletic, dynamic. I thought Donovan Jackson did too until he hurt himself and then looked a little rough. And honestly, somebody should have pulled the guy out of the drills. He didn't look great by the end of it. But I thought those 3 linemen in particular all stood out today for positive winners.
To answer the chat, I see you sideline, Sarah. You were calling us out for maybe calling out people about Bobby Slowick and the Texans the other day. I think we give the Texans plenty of love. I think their roster's in great shape. Defensive lines, that doesn't matter. We said the people are, blaming Bobby for things. And it's like, well, let's be serious. A lot of people were blaming the offensive coordinator. And I'm not saying he's not to blame for a lot of stuff.
Including the team, by the way. They fired him.
Yeah, they blamed him, of course. So
it doesn't get much more blameful than we are letting go of you.
She said she'd bring the Texans fan, so let's touch on it quickly here.
That's cool.
I do believe the Texans, they clearly had some pass protection issues, and I believe we were very fair in saying that's partially on the players, and I think they looked unprepared. And they fired the offensive line coach and they fired the offensive coordinator. So I think all of those things were true. And if they do tighten up the offensive line, I could see a world where CJ Stroud gets back to the promise that he showed as a rookie, where he could be one of those next, top 5 or 6 quarterbacks in the NFL that could make a run for Houston. So I think they're in great shape. Have to approach the offensive line with some vigor this offseason. But the rest of their roster's been built fantastically by Nick Caserio and company after a few years of, resetting the team, resetting the culture, and not thinking long-term or not adding long-term deals. Now they have a really good nucleus. So I like where the Texans are right now.
All right, I've got one loser from today, and then we'll take some questions before we wrap it up from the chat.
Yeah.
So fire your questions in.
If it's not Will Campbell, we at least have to touch on him.
It is Will Campbell. As luck would have it. It's perfect. Will Campbell, and unfortunately, it's not really his fault, right? We knew this was going to be the case, but we finally got numbers attached to his arm length thing, and the arm length is problematic. It's, 32 and a half arms?
32 and 5/8.
5/8. But perhaps more importantly, his wingspan is literally the smallest wingspan for an offensive tackle that mockdraftable.com has ever measured. So his arm length is in the, that's kind of problematic range. You're probably getting kicked into guard at that level anyway. But his wingspan is literally, if he played at tackle, would literally be the smallest they've ever measured. And that was the thing, is that, like, Kelvin Banks dealt with this as well. Kelvin Banks from Texas, his arm length, not great, not horrific, but like the difference is Kelvin Banks's wingspan is in the 82nd percentile for tackles. Much wider body, like just a much bigger person. That was what stood out for me watching Will Campbell. It's like, that guy just doesn't look big. Like, he's a small guy who just happens to be able to play offensive line extremely well. And to be fair to him, extremely athletic. Like, the numbers, his relative athletic score was like top 98, high 98th percentile. So if you're gonna bet on a guy to, overcome the arm length and the wingspan thing, that's the kind of athlete you're going to do it with. The 40 time was good, all those kinds of things. But man, I just don't see teams giving him a shot at that arm length wingspan combo.
Yeah, I want to try to tell both sides of the story here, because I'm a big believer in you have something you believe in when you're evaluating draft prospects. And if people are outside of that, if players are outside of that, it's okay to push them aside and say no. So I believe in, having, some people might call it a model, and I'm not going to touch on any of that. It's my brain. But I have my own idea of what I want to look for, right? And if players are outside of that, in the past, I've said, it's okay, let someone else take that chance. So the people that might cut Will Campbell off and say, we don't want to deal with that. I get it. Like, I can empathize with that. Okay. Now it's a little disingenuous if you're, old man Greg Gabriel, and you're just like, hey, there's only one left tackle under 33-inch arms, and that's Bernard Ryman, who, by the way, is awesome. Mm-hmm. And that's the only guy, and that's an outlier, because there's 5 other tackles that are sub 33-inch arms, including his teammate Braden Smith, including Luke Gedeke. And Luke Gedeke is my favorite example, because he's the guy who, as soon as he's under 33-inch arms, everybody throws their hands up and they're like, he's a guard, can't do it, can't play tackle, put him at guard. And he was terrible at guard, put him back out at tackle, and he's been a good tackle for 2 years for the Tampa Bay Bucks. So the other side of this is, and I had this backed up, I brought this up to a high-end executive this week, talking to him at the NFL Scouting Combine. And I said, I'm a big believer in trying somebody at tackle, and if they fail, move them to guard. Why not? Like, if you hit on a tackle, it's more valuable. The scarcity's there. It's more valuable to find a starting tackle than a starting guard. So try him at tackle. So I don't think we all need to stare at a number and say, it's under 33, he's a guard. I'm a scout. I know how to analyze. I know this. I know what to do. He's a guard. Like, it's okay to bring him into camp and say he's a tackle. And if he can't do it, if we find out that the arm length is a hindrance to his ability to block people, we can always move him into guard. So I think you could still play that game. I think you could still play that game with, like, Peter Skoronski in Tennessee, where they have a massive tackle need, and I think he can hold up a tackle with his T-Rex arms. I think you can do it. Now, the bigger question is, do you want to do that at 4 if you're the Patriots who have a massive tackle need? And I get it if you don't want to do that. Or do you want to do that at 10 if you're the Bears? And, they don't need a tackle. They could use a guard. So maybe it's easier pill to swallow. So anyway, there's two sides of the story. But either way, yeah, you would say Will Campbell's a loser because he's under 33-inch arms for
and that's why,
combine.
That's why I think he's the loser. It's not because anyone thinks he's a worse player because of it. It's because you're just probably not taking that guy at 4 to play left guard, right? If that's where you think he is. And I know, Skoronski went at 7, right? So that was high. People had the same argument then. We can't take a guard at 7, and they did. So it's not entirely impossible.
And the Titans are sitting there trotting out the worst right tackle situation in the NFL over the last 2 years. And the second best tackle on their team, or maybe the best tackle on their team, is playing left guard and not exactly excelling at that position. So,
did you see the comp that Daniel Jeremiah pulled out for him?
For Will Campbell? I did not.
Yeah. Michael Ruse, left tackle for the Titans back in the day.
Good job.
All
DJ.
pro with stumpy little arms. Now, he was another guy. He was like Hutchinson, right? He's 6'7", Michael Ruse, but had 32.5 or 32 5/8-inch arms like Will Campbell. So weird, but they kept him at left tackle. He made it all pro. He made a Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
Like, it's doable.
Michael Ruse was great. And here's the other thing too. Like the players who do have sub 33-inch arms are probably, Braden Smith and Gedeke. Like those guys are special in other ways. Like you have to be good enough in all the other ways to excel at tackle. And Campbell's good enough that we're talking about him as a top 5 pick, and he just had a bad measurement. That always existed. So, he's the type of guy that could excel there because he's good in the other areas. Anything else? That's it for you, right?
Yeah, I'm out. We can do questions.
Yeah, we'll take questions. Who are your winners and losers from this week, or any questions? I'll say one other big loser this week is our health. The health, your health at the scouting combine. I mean, it might sound crazy, but standing around and walking from place to place and talking to people, it is tiring. It wears you down.
Well, that should be good. The walking part should be the only thing that's helping.
It's a full job here. Full job during the week. I mean, I was there Monday through Saturday. I extended my stay through Saturday night, and boy, it literally felt like a month. I spent a month in Indy for a week, is what happened.
Yeah. No,
but it was great. I love it. It's my favorite week of the year, Sam. I love it. It's just like
it's a young man's game, as they say.
And then we had the drama. We addressed the drama, the Starbucks drama, the insider drama, Jordan Schultz and Ian Rapoport. Everybody's talking about it. It's all, it's on the broadcast. NFL Network's even talking about it.
My favorite part of the broadcast is Rich Eisen chucking in like coffee shop references every hour just to
yeah.
It was very well done.
And let me just tell you a couple things here. First off, I killed you in the Sando game. Speaking of the coffee shop, 8-1, 7-1 was the final. Where's Sando? Found him 7 times.
Yeah.
You only found him once.
Well, no. How many did you actually find him versus how many did you self-identify?
He tracked me down like 3 to 4 times. Was kind of like, oh, I'm here. But I had the one, like the classic one where I just came around the corner and he was just standing there. That was perfect. That was old school. I found Sando. So that was great. But that usually happens. I usually find Sando and others at the Starbucks, the JW Marriott Starbucks. It's the hub. It's everybody's coming from their hotel. All the hotels merge right at the JW Starbucks. So in it, any given day, you see head coaches, you see GMs, you see insiders, you see people talking, there's meetings, you meet people. It's the whole thing. You see people trying to get jobs. It's all happening at the JW Starbucks. And at that melting point of information is where you have Jordan Schultz, whose dad started Starbucks, attacking, verbally assaulting was the report, in Rapoport because of their conflicting reports on the Matthew Stafford, Tom Brady, whatever. They were skiing. Maybe they were together. Maybe they weren't. Who knows? Nobody got to the bottom of this, although there was a spat at the Starbucks. And that was literally the biggest news of the week, right? There was a fight at the Starbucks, and then number 2, Matthew Stafford was almost on the move, and now he's back with the Rams. That was the news of the week.
Yeah. And there's since been a photograph of the incident, but no video. So it just remains a punchline / joke, unfortunately.
NFL security still digging into it, digging deep into the information here. I thought, it was kind of funny. We'll touch on the Debo thing. We'll do a separate video on Debo. Is that what we agreed?
Yeah.
Anybody else have any winners and losers this week, or anybody got questions about?
Yeah, let's see what other questions we got.
You talked about the Joe Thomas thing, right? Joe Thomas was on this show, and he said he had like 4 different arm lengths. And did we talk about Brandon Thorne came out and said everybody who was at the Senior Bowl was all of a sudden, what, half an inch shorter this year?
Yeah, it's like half an inch off this year.
Like, that's pretty significant, man. That's
Joe
pretty,
Thomas,
especially if you're talking 32.5 versus 33.
Yeah. We used to do this ourselves because, Joe Thomas had this reported 33-inch arm length, but both Joe Thomas and Mitchell Schwartz have subsequently debunked that as actually, however they measured him when they did that, they were like way off because his were like 35 or something. So unfortunately, it used to be like the best defense against this idea that arm length really, really matters. You're like, well, the best pass blocker in the last 20 years had short arms, only it turns out he didn't.
Bashal Tootin from Virginia Tech. We didn't talk a whole lot of running backs. He is a winner from this week. Absolutely. What was his final time? I sent it to ran in the 4.3s and was a big play threat for Virginia Tech. Fumbled 5 times last year. So not great in that respect, but he's a guy who could take it to the house. And I think that's it was a big week for him. Running fast and showing the big play threat that he is.
What about your guy Scadaboo, who didn't run but jumped his way out of the place at that size?
It's explosive. Now maybe he won't run 4.6, 4.7 like he looks, but
there's a strong correlation between the jumps in the 40 and his jumps were exceptional.
Yeah, man, I just think he's a good football player. I don't know, like, I hate who put like a Mike Allstott comp next to him and everything. Like, dude, he's not Allstott was a fullback who they then put to tailback and was like, all right, just go be a battering ram. Like, Scadaboo,
all of his comps
is
are
tough
like
to
25
tackle, but
pounds too heavy.
He's just a good all around, like, on Kareem Hunt. I might have him. Kareem Hunt might be a better comp for Scadaboo. I'll have to go back and see if I wrote anybody down.
But he's also like, you can't be comping him to guys that are like 6'3", 250. He's 5'9".
Yeah, I know. And he's just tough to tackle. He's not like Allstott was a battering ram. He was an old school fullback who just ran people over. That's not necessarily what Scadaboo does.
Like, somebody was calling him Toby Gerhardt. And that's, again, same thing. It's like he's just so much different type of player.
No. Let me see. Did I have any other?
But actually, a 39.5-inch vert and a 10'3" broad jump for Scadaboo are really good data points. And that might suggest he's going to run faster than you think he will.
So I wrote down in my notes, so comps are stylistically, Tyler Algier, as who I loved coming out as a zone runner who gets what's there, but the strength and contact balance of Scadaboo is better, I think. And Algier's tough to tackle. So better version of Algier. That's not going to excite a lot of people, but I think he's legit. Better pass catcher coming out of the backfield. That's the thing with comps. You can't get everything in one. No, he's not Peyton Hillis. Everybody stop.
What about MJD?
MJD, I will always reserve for Nick Chubb because Nick Chubb's a bigger MJD, like that level of tackle. Like, I don't think he's that tough to tackle. MJD was such a low center of gravity guy.
But that's the thing he's got working for him, right? Like, he's 5'9", 220. That's insane.
There's something there. MJD, maybe had some more explosiveness to him. Remember how MJD put himself on the map? Week 1, 2006. He had a blitz pickup on Sean Merriman, and he just stoned Merriman. And it was like, all right, this dude can play. They already had Fred Taylor, but like MJD started earning playing time immediately. So now everybody's Genty. It's RJ Harvey. MJD gets comps every year, Sam. It's not fair.
But none of them make any sense because he's like almost a singularly unique player ever.
He is. So I went Nick Chubb, bigger version of that. We have breaking news that the Jets are expected to release Devontae Adams if they can't work out a trade, per Ian Rapoport. This could be the if the Bills truly need that X receiver, this could be their best fit. I think we did mention that in the Fixing Every Team in 5 minutes videos, which, by the way, if you haven't already checked out, you should check all those out here on the YouTube channel and, hit like and subscribe and do all that stuff. Your thoughts?
Nothing drums up a trade like saying we're about to release this guy.
Yeah. Please trade for him immediately. And we'll touch. We're going to touch on Debo separately. We said. Did
Yeah.
we agree on that? Okay. Any other winners and losers this week for the chat or questions? Marion Hampton had a good week. UNC running back. His buzz continues to carry on. There was some reports that some teams have him higher than Ashton Genty. None of that's crazy. Look, there's 32 teams, of which each team has between 3 and like 50 evaluators. Some teams have 3 or 4. Just saying. So there's a lot of evaluations out there. So chances are there's going to be some people and maybe even some teams that have something that sounds crazy. DJ Giddens, Kansas State running back, he had a good workout as well. Some good running backs. It is a good running back class. I will stand firm on the second round run on running backs.
I mean, it's funny because like in a way, none of the running backs really stood out, but it's because they were just all really good. Like it felt like every running back ran a 4.4 something, which is like right where you want to be. I mean, that was when Breece Hall ran a 4.4 or something. It was like, wow, that was pleasantly surprising and cements him as like a really good running back in this class, right? We didn't think he quite had that speed, and then he showed that he did. It felt like every running back put up that kind of number this time.
Bashal Tutin was 4.32 was his best. Jaden Blue 4.38. Brashard Smith, the receiver conversion at 4.39. I believe he was also a handful of running backs stayed after the workout yesterday because I was there, Sam. Stayed after their workout and ran some receiver routes. I believe Brashard Smith was in that group. RJ Harvey at 4.4. And Giddens, who we just mentioned, was at 4.43. Trevion Henderson at 4.43. A lot of guys in the 4.4s, as you mentioned. And you have a guy like Raheem Sanders. Didn't he have the highest top speed? And he was like 12th or 13th.
Yeah.
In the 40. I don't know. What do you do with that? It just means he's not as fast in the first 30, but he eventually gets to the fastest top speed.
Well, this is
and we've started using that as like the metric that we see during games. And it's like, well, the fastest guys have the fastest top speed, but it really doesn't correlate at all to the 40, which used to be our mental image of what the fastest guys are. What do we do with all this information?
Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, the Minnesota Vikings GM, talked about this a little bit when he was on his podium about how with all of this more information, they're building sort of composite, speed and acceleration kind of numbers because you've got, again, there's so many different ways of measuring this, and we're just used to like 40 equals speed, right? But only over a random arbitrary line in the sand. Like, okay, that equals speed to 40 yards, but what about to 35 or to 45 or to 20 or 10 or 5? You know what I mean? It's all just where you decide to draw the line. And then there's the, like you see, if anybody's a car guy, right? The YouTube is full of these things where they do drag races between cars, but then, and the Lamborghini smokes the Porsche, but then they do the same drag race from like a rolling start from 20 miles an hour, and it's a different result. Like these things are completely different depending on how exactly you want to measure them. And every football play is putting you in a slightly different position of when you need the speed, right? Do you need it from an already fairly comfortable rolling start, sort of Derrick Henry style, where you're already rumbling by the time you really need to put the gas down? Or like, is the play blown up, you're going from literally a standing start in the backfield because you've got to make a cut and then go? These are totally different like measures of speed. And yet we're expected to get the answer of which one you want just from a 40 time. So smart teams like the Vikings apparently are using all of these different speed data points to build these like composite pictures of what speed actually looks like, and trying to separate, the 15 guys that ran between 4.4 and 4.43, actually putting those guys into different buckets depending on what the rest of the profile looks like.
It's a good breakdown, Sam. I like it. I do think that's a great. Every team has this information for the game too, right? For game speed, not just for the 40, right? So it is interesting. I think shout out to NFL.com and what they have done with their combine IQ, and they've done a nice job adding next gen stats and timing the workouts and everything. And the data set's only a few years old, And it will be interesting as you study those data points going forward. Right now, they're interesting data points. Remember last year we talked about Keon Coleman and how his gauntlet was fast, but his 40 was slow. And I thought it was right? Wasn't it Coleman where that happened?
Yeah.
Fast gauntlet, slow 40. And we said, okay, that's interesting, but like I don't know what I do with that. Does that mean that his game speed's better? Does it mean that he's bad at 40s and get off times or whatever? I don't know yet because it's early, but that's going to be interesting studying, say, the combine data as we have a bigger data sample over the next few years. But yeah, teams have all of the speed information at every interval, every second interval and everything, and they can study it in various ways and figure out how to do this study it in game settings, even, outside of the combine.
Yeah, and we keep talking about, I mean, facetiously sometimes, but I do wonder how far you would get if you simply took the worst performance at any drill you've ever seen and threw that guy out and said, I'm not drafting him. It's awful. Troy Franklin, we both love Troy Franklin. Literally ran the worst gauntlet I've ever seen anybody run in my life, like weaving 5 yards in the wrong direction, not even towards the ball, like falling away from the ball in both slalom directions. Genuinely the worst gauntlet I've ever seen run. And certainly didn't hit the ground running in the NFL. Maybe it's a little early to write off all Troy. I'm just saying, even if you said there's a lot of data saying draft Troy, on the other hand, this one drill was so bad that I'm calling it prohibitive and I'm not drafting him. I wonder if you did that for like every different thing. If you just said, that is so bad, I can't take that. Chuck that guy off your board, how good you'd be. I think there's something to that.
Data set, man. The data set. It's a good week over at the NFL Scouting Combine. I know a lot of what we did is, after hours and behind the scenes and everything, but it's just a fascinating time where the entire NFL is in one of like 4 places at any given time, and the people that you can run into and things you hear and all that stuff. It's an interesting week over there in Indy, and all culminated today with the O-line workouts here. So appreciate everybody being here with us. Hit subscribe once again if you have not. And tomorrow we're back to Mock Draft Monday. You and I, post-combine mock draft. You and I going back and forth, doing a mock draft, and we'll get back into our content flow this week. 9 a.m. tomorrow, 10:30 Wednesday, 10:30 Thursday. Thumbs up, subscribe, and the bell. Do all the things, and you'll get all the alerts. That good?
Yep.
All right. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again tomorrow morning. Mock Draft Monday.